Hey everyone, so today we're going to go over strict equality checks in JavaScript and how you can leverage them in your application. So I hope you enjoy. So welcome back. I am going to go over strict equality checks in JavaScript. I think this might be a difficult concept to grasp. It might seem easy, but it's not. It doesn't really pan out to be that way. So let's start right now. So we have primitive values. We'll do equality checks with primitive values, and then we'll do equality checks with referential values. So before we move on, what are primitive values? Those would be numbers, booleans, and strings. Those are primitive values. When we talk about referential types in JavaScript, we're talking about objects, we're talking about arrays, symbols, and whatever the ES people decide to make. But basically, we're going to focus on objects and arrays because those are the main things that we're going to use. So let's start off over here. So let's make a const var 1 and a const var 2, and let's just put a console log over here, and we will say just for us to see visually, var 1 triple equal var 2 and $, and then we'll get the value for var 1 is triple equals to var 2. So let's figure out what these are equal to. So right now, when you don't really initialize a variable with a value, like say var 1 is equal to 1, this pans out to be undefined. So if we actually go right here and we type down node main.js, let's see what's going on. Const var 1, missing initializer and const declaration. Okay, so this is breaking over here. The node version I have is breaking this. This is probably a spec as well. So let's just declare it as undefined right now. In the world of web browsers, if you don't initialize a variable with a value, then it will just default to undefined. So in this case, it's undefined, and we're seeing this is true. Even if we break it down to its double equals, which I don't really want to cover, but let's see what if we get anything interesting. So this gets this pans out to be true as well. So now let's figure out some basic stuff. So 1 and 1, and also just to make things a bit more clear, we're just going to do console.clear, just so we can clear the console as well. So we see now var 1 and var 2 is equal to true, and that should be fine. So I think this is easy for us to understand. Even if we make this into a string, if we make these both into strings and we run this, we see this is equal to true. But if we put something else over here and now we run this, it should give us false. So last but not least is just regular boolean. So if we do true and we do true over here, we should get true because both of those values are the same. And if we save that to be false, we get that to be false as well. Let's see if we can try to break this over here. So if we go 0 and 0 over here, and we make this to double equals only, we see this is equal to true. So this is this is why I say in JavaScript, don't try to use a double equal sign unless you truly know what you're doing. Like if it fits your use case, sure, go ahead by all means, but in 99% of the use cases, you will need a double equals, because this does not check, this does not specifically check the type of the variable. So let's try to change this up. I think this will break now. 0 as, yes, I definitely want to check 0 versus 0 as. Yeah, so this I guess it tries to infer the type that you mean. So it'll be like, oh, I see a 0 over here and I see a 0 over there. So it infers one of those types back to the original type. So if we make this equal to 1 and we save this, yes, it's fine. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So we went through all the primitive types for JavaScript, and now for numbers, booleans, and strings. Now let's move on to referential types, because I think this is where the chunk of the video should be. Okay, so let's go down over here. Let's comment this out. And now let's start off with our first one. Objects are everywhere in JavaScript. If you don't use objects in JavaScript, why are you using JavaScript in the first place? So objects are great. Everyone uses objects. So what do you think is going to happen right now? Right? It's var1 and var2, and they're both empty objects, and we're trying to see if they're equal to each other. Logically, you're like, yeah, this is going to be true, but no, this is equal to false. So it's equal to false over here. So an empty object does not actually equal an empty object, even though they are the same thing, right? They're both an empty object. Let's do one thing over here. Let's do hello, and it'll have the key hello and the value world. So let's go down over here and save that as well. And let's see what we get over here. Still, we're getting false. One thing that will happen to trigger that it's true is, actually, let me go over the other reason why first, and then we will show you how to make this true. So on line 13, JavaScript's going to evaluate it like this. On line 13, it's going to create a new variable with the new reference to an object, and this object is hello and world. Then it'll go to line 14, and then we'll create another variable with a new reference to hello, to this object, hello world. So when JavaScript comes here and tries to strict equal this thing, it's going to check the referential equality, meaning that are these objects the exact same objects? They don't care about what's inside, when in reality what's inside will match as well, because references point to the same object. So in this case, just because they have the same content doesn't mean that they will evaluate to true. So what I mean by that is, if we now take var1, right? We take var1 and we're like, var2 is equal to var1. Well, let's go over what we just said. Triple equals checks referential equality. So on line 13, we create this object with the new, we create variable 1 with the new reference to this object, and then we go to line 14 and we take that same reference and we store it in var2. So now when we run this, we get that it's true over here, plain and simple. Okay, so now what's going to happen, if you're a relatively experienced JavaScript developer, you know there's this thing called a spread operator. So what a spread operator does, just a little cliff notes, is that it takes this object and then it spreads all the values contained inside the object in here. So this will evaluate to, this var2 will exactly evaluate to this. It will just be the exact same thing, and we can confirm it too by just doing console log var2 and var1. What the heck, right? And let's run this and see what we get. We get hello world, okay? And actually this is really interesting. We'll keep this over here just to show how these variables, what they are equal to in the process. Okay, so we spread this, we spread variable 1 inside variable 2. We took whatever values we are in, what is inside of it, and we made a new object called var2. So now let's save this and let's run this and see what we get. We get var1 and var2 is false, but you're like, hey, but we took var1, right? Isn't the reference the same? Yes and no. So the reference, mainly no. So the reference is not the same because these brackets here are is telling JavaScript compiler to create a new object. So as long as on the outside the reference is getting created, so in this case it's a new object with these curly brackets, it's going to create this new object and spread the values on the inside. So now let's remove this because we don't need it, because this is an object on its own. And we go back here, and now hello and world is true. Let's do one thing over here. Okay, let's do hello world and buy good world. I don't know where I'm going with this, but just stick with me. So buy good world over here, hello, buy good world, and I want to do the same thing for var2 over here. So save that, remove this. So now we have an object inside an object over here. So now if we run this, obviously we'll get false, because if you remember what I told you, it is checking the reference of variable 1 and variable 2. So over here on line 19, it's creating a new object, and on line 13, it's creating a new object. It doesn't matter if the values inside is exactly the same. Now, so there's an object inside an object. So if we do var1 by, which references an object, var2 by, and we make them equal, and again, we're getting false here. This is still false. But let's do this one thing now. So var2 dot by is equal to var1 dot by over here. So now let's run this, and we see that it's still, we're getting true now, because what we're doing is we're taking the reference of variable 1, we're taking the reference to this by key, and we're storing it in variable 2's by key. And that's how this evaluates to being true. So I hope now this makes more sense. Let's go over one more thing. So let me comment this out, go over here, and instead of all of this, let's play with arrays now. Okay, so now we don't have by anymore, it's just var1 and var2, and we're just making them equal to each other. So now, if you remember from our objects part, we know that this is going to evaluate to false, right? Because the reference to these two referential types is just going to be false, because there's a new reference getting created to an empty array and a new reference getting created over here. But if you want to do something like checking length of them, you can totally do that. Be like, is this array's length exactly the same? And this will evaluate to true. So similarly, you can now take var1, place it into var2, and now you should get that this is equal, var1 is equal to var2, as we're getting over here. Another thing is if we do 0, 1, 2, and we save that, and again the bottom is also 0, 1, 2, this should evaluate to false, because again we're creating new references to this array. And again, I told you about the spread operator. So if we do ... var1, we spread that guy in here, now this is going to be false, because we're creating a new reference to this. Okay, but you're like, okay, so what if Floyd or t.code, I want to check the values. I want to see the equality of the entire structure of this, of the objects and the arrays. You could totally do that. There's nothing stopping you. But you'll need help from third-party libraries, or you need to make implementations yourself. You'll have to make these functions yourself. One thing that I do know that everyone can use is Lodash. So let's actually get Lodash right now. So Lodash over here. So we'll do yarn add Lodash. And also let's go over to Lodash's home site over here. And let's search for their deep equal. They have something over here called a deep equal. If I can figure out how to work their thing over here. So deep equal, let's just do equal is equal. Okay, so is equal over here, as you can see, we are creating two different objects now, but with is equal, it will check if the value, if the contents of that inside is true. So let's actually bring that in. So var require Lodash over here, and then I will need to get Lodash in. So let me just copy this for time's sake, and we will paste that in over, let's paste that in over here, right? And then this will be, I don't need a semicolon over here, and this will be var1 and var2. And we need to bring back our old variables over here because we're playing with objects now. So let's do that and uncomment this. And now let's run this and see what we get. So node main, and we see now that with the deep equal from Lodash, even though their references are the same, we are now checking the entire contents of this object. So if we change good to word instead of world and we run that, now we see that we're getting false because Lodash's is equal is traversing this object to check whether each key matches the other object's key over here. So let's see, is equal, I wonder if they have something for arrays over here. So is equal, this method supports comparing arrays. Okay, so this supports comparing arrays as well. So let's do that now. We've confirmed that it works for this. So now let's go back to arrays over here. So now, as we said, this doesn't check referential equality no more. So is equal checks the content. So this should evaluate to true. Okay. So now let's add some values in this as well. 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2 over here. And now let's run this. This should evaluate to true. I am curious about one thing, whether Lodash is also checking the position of the value in the array. So instead of it being 0, 1, 2, this is 2, 1, 0. Now you can take your guesses to figure out what it says, but I would like to run this and see, and this evaluates to false. So this does make sense because the position of an array is pretty important as compared to a position of an object. Keys don't really have positions in an object, so they don't really matter. And what I mean by that is over here position matters, but if we fall back to our object version, and now you know how I said position matters in arrays but not objects. So now I moved by first and hello at the bottom. So now let's run this and let me not eat my words. Yeah, so this evaluates to true because in maps and objects, positions don't really matter in this case because they don't really have this concept of a position, whereas arrays do. So over here, this doesn't matter about where this by key is, as long as it is inside of this first level. It's not like nested inside another level. This should be true over here. So that is what I wanted to cover in this video. I hope everyone found this video helpful. Equality checks are truly tricky in JavaScript, and they help you understand how other frameworks work too. Like in React, there's these things called use memo, and they use referential equalities, even though you're like, this array is exactly the same as a previous array. So this is very good to know. But that concludes this video. I hope you found this helpful. Please support this channel by dropping a like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.